What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So wouldn't you know it, we almost got done with Summer Game Fest and the Xbox Showcase without any major controversy breaking out, but it appears Microsoft is kind of dealing with one a bit now after it exploded online around Starfield, and they even responded giving some reasoning around it, which we'll go over all of that here today. Also, we are going to be talking about one of the strangest releases I've seen in a long time. It's a new Game Boy game coming from a very unlikely source, and we'll also be talking about Embracer Group, who seems to be going through some struggles right now, and this appears to include several cuts and restructuring going forward. So if you guys enjoy the video, make sure the like button helps out a ton, and if you're new to the SpawnWave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And we're going to start today with Summer Game Fest, not Summer Game Fest 2023, next year's Summer Game Fest, as it has been announced. You can see this posted up over on Twitter. This from the Summer Game Fest account, saying, after a record-setting 2023, we are excited to share some news. Summer Game Fest will return June 2024, including our live showcased event hosted by Jeff Keighley, Summer Game Fest Playdays from I Am 8-Bit. Stay tuned for more details in the coming months. So, not really surprising, as clearly Summer Game Fest has continued to build over the last, couple of years now, and it is kind of becoming that E3 replacement, but it's still not quite there yet. I will admit, Jeff Keighley having the in-person event certainly helped certain titles. Prince of Persia got a lot of praise from people having hands-on time. Even Jeff Keighley himself saying that, hey, it's running at a nice clean 60 frames on the Switch. Even Foam Stars had some very positive coverage, some calling it their surprise game of the show. These are titles that wouldn't necessarily be getting that kind of coverage if it didn't have like a live event like this for press to get hands-on time with. So if he can keep building up this event to maybe get closer to that big trade show that E3 took, a couple decades to get to, I think that'd be awesome to see. So I'm all for it. Let's see what Jeff can do next year with Summer Game Fest 2024. Also, it looks like Triangle Strategy just got a new update with some additional content, and we can see the patch notes here. Now, this is version 1.1.0. They added a character story replay feature as well as a story battle replay feature, and they added extra chapter events. This appears to be kind of like an epilogue event cutscene. So if you've played through the game, I would go and check this out just to get more story, and several issues have been addressed to improve the gameplay experience. I think it's really cool to see Triangle Strategy just get an update kind of out of nowhere, but if you have the game, it's just additional content to go and check out. And also, the game is on sale right now, so this update makes a lot of sense to coincide with that. But it is fun just to see more content coming out of Team Asano, and I'm still curious what's next for them, especially after seeing something like Triangle Strategy that they're still supporting. It seems like the future's pretty bright for them. Oh, and we did just talk about Capcom with their showcase, and while that wasn't the best showcase we've seen over the last week or so, it does look like Capcom is still asking questions about some of their dormant intellectual properties. For example, this was posted up by Breath of Fire, the Twitter account here, saying Capcom has a survey for the 2023 showcase. Breath of Fire is selectable, and you can write in your own thoughts, and you can kind of see the list here. Now, this is like a fan page for Breath of Fire, so it's not the official one, but they are pointing out that not only Breath of Fire, but also if you look in here, I saw Dino Crisis is in there. Mega Man. Okay, Mega Man, to be fair, even though his dive was at least at the showcase, but Breath of Fire, I mean, that's been missing for a long time alongside of Dino Crisis. So if you want to go over to the survey and check those boxes and leave them a little message, Capcom's pretty creative right now. They're using RE Engine on everything. Why not an RE Engine Breath of Fire remake, or maybe just a complete reboot for the franchise? Something to keep an eye on there, but hey, if you want to let them know, go check out the survey. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with the big controversy that's circling Xbox with their massive release coming up, Starfield, which after that showcase looks incredibly impressive what Bethesda has been able to create here. The game still needs to come out. We need to see how it turns out bug and glitch wise, which with Bethesda, hell, they're called Bugthesda for a reason, but I have a bit more confidence with this one, considering they've had quite a bit of time to work on this, even delaying it out and also leveraging Xbox's own engineers to get the game to the finish line. However, the game is unfortunately locked at 30 FPS even on the Xbox Series X. A lot of people were hoping that there would be a performance mode or a 60 FPS mode for it, but just to refresh your memory, this was mentioned by Todd Howard, where he says, "I think it'll come as no surprise given our previous games, what we go for, always these huge open worlds, fully dynamic, hyper detailed, where anything can happen. And we do want to do that. It's 4K on this Series X, 1440p on the Series S. We do lock it at 30 because we want that fidelity, want all that stuff. We don't want to sacrifice any of it." He did mention that they were able to run it close to 60 at times, but it sounds like it was a very iffy frame rate, so I'm thinking it's probably all over the place if it's not capped at 30. And some people prefer the smooth 30 even over having that performance option where it's, again, it could fluctuate into the 40s or 30s. And if you played something like, just as an example, Final Fantasy 16 right now, like that's on my mind because I was playing it. The performance mode there is kind of sketchy. And that and Jedi Survivor, where I turned on the quality mode to lock it at 30, unfortunate they have to do that, but it is a better experience overall having that, which is so weird to say, but inconsistent frame rates are pretty rough at times. However, we did get a bit of an explanation as to why they went this route. This with Phil Spencer and Giant Bomb saying, "At some point, not to get all geeky about it, but there's render time per frame and teams can either want to go horizontal or go kind of deep on a frame. And it's a creative choice. We obviously have games that are running at 4K 60 on the platform. It's not a platform issue. It's a creative decision. I trust the decisions Bethesda Game Studios makes, and I trust what I'm playing. I don't ever want us to turn playing games into a math exercise. I'm not saying that 60 FPS or resolution don't impact what you play, but I don't think we want that to turn into an Excel thing. I think you want to give the creatives the tools to make the best decisions, and the game will be what it is. I think Starfield's going to be a great game, and I love the reception today, and I don't want to kind of force specs on every game before they start." Now, this, as I mentioned, exploded online to a point where even developer at Sony Santa Monica got involved. I think this is replying to Dreamcast guy. He was kind of like trolling on Twitter at one point, but he says, "Game dev here, big fan. Wanted to clarify, it's not a sign of an unfinished game. It's a choice. 60 FPS on this scale would be a large hit to the visual fidelity. My guess is they want to go for a seamless look and less pop-in, and of course you're right to dislike the choice." And that's basically what it's come down to, is it worth all the bells and whistles that they're describing for this game, and in some cases showing off with some pretty impressive stuff when it comes to the physics and just how large the game is and everything the game has to account for across this massive universe. And is it worth having all of that but being stuck at 30? Or do you prefer them to scale things back and be able to push up to 60 frames per second? Because I think right now, a lot of people have been thinking that it has to do with strictly resolution. Like you turn the resolution down, all of a sudden you're going to get 60 frames per second locked. Maybe you have to go down to 1080p, but you can still get there. Well, I do wonder if in this case, because it is Bethesda and we've seen some of their previous titles, if this ends up being more CPU bound as opposed to GPU bound. One of the reasons I'm thinking that is because the Xbox Series S is 1440p. That's typically a 1080p box. So because the Series S and the Series X share pretty much the same CPU, a couple megahertz terms of clock speed, but basically the same, it does make you wonder when it comes to the CPU side as opposed to the GPU side. And I have seen some people from like Digital Foundry attempt to clarify that this isn't as straightforward as being made out to be online. For me personally, I do prefer 60 frames if you can get it. I mean, I don't really know any situation where 30 would ever be better than 60 frames. And when I looked at something like Jedi Survivor with the performance mode being as poor as it was with frame pacing, I had to turn on the quality mode just because it could not get anywhere near 60 frames per second. But if it's locked at 60 and it's locked at 30 and you have the choice, I'm going 60 every time. However, I do also believe there are games out there that if it's only available at 30 or less at times, with something like The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, you'll say, you know what, that's just the way it is, and play it because the game is that good. And I kind of feel like for a lot of people, after seeing the scope that Bethesda is pushing with the showcase, that they're willing to just say, you know what, that's the way it is, I want to play it. Redfall, different situation. The game wasn't good enough to overcome the limitations of the 30 FPS cap. Starfield looking like it probably will be. But let me know how you fall on this whole thing. And if you're someone maybe who's like, I got a PC, I'm good, I'll just play it there at 60. I'm very curious to see how this game holds up with certain video cards and builds, especially on that CPU side. Should be really interesting coming up in September. Next up, let's talk about Embracer Group. Now, we had gone over a deal that fell through for them that was worth nearly $2 billion, and that's still shrouded in mystery, specifically what client that would have been for Embracer Group. Sounds like it would have been a pretty big company that would have been contracting them for $2 billion, and without it, it seemed like the CEO was not having a lot of fun on that live stream, especially after having to break the news to investors. And it's probably because he knew what was going to have to be done, and that's mostly restructuring, cutting back, and sounds like laying off and even canceling a bunch of projects. This was all done in an open letter over on their website. I'll go over some of the highlights here, where they say the program is divided into different phases until March 2024, with focus on cost savings, capital allocation, efficiency, and consolidation. Now, it seemed like the different phases, like there are two of them, they both start immediately. They're just happening. And the final phase will be the one that runs up to 2024, basically. They said the actions will include, but not be limited to, closing or divestments of some studios and the termination or pausing of some ongoing game development projects. It will also include decreased spending on non-development costs such as overhead and other operating expenses. We'll reduce third-party publishing and put greater focus on internal IP and increase external funding of large budget games. The potential impact from the program of future game releases will almost entirely be around unannounced projects. All announced significant releases will still be released as planned. Now, Crystal Dynamics immediately came out on Twitter and said, this does not affect us. We're still like all systems go on Tomb Raider, that's in collaboration with Amazon Games. And of course, Perfect Dark, they are working to co-develop that with the initiative for Microsoft. So they seem to be left out of this when it comes to the restructuring, cutting, reallocation of funds. The one that I'm a little concerned about right now, but it seems like because it's been announced it'll be okay, is Time Splitters. I mean, we don't really have a lot of information around it other than, yes, they've started all of that up, but hopefully that one's all right. Otherwise, though, when you look at Embracer Group, they grew so rapidly. So there are a lot of places I'm sure they'll look to cut down, and it'll probably be a lot of folding companies into others and unfortunately laying people off. They mentioned they have currently 17,000 employees there, which is mind-blowing for Embracer. They said that they're not going to have that many by March 2024. No word on how many people will be laid off, but I feel like it's going to be a significant amount because after losing that $2 billion contract, it seems like things have become very dire for Embracer Group. So we'll see what happens with them going forward. Again, March 2024 is when they expect to have a lot of this all done. So 8 months or so from now, we'll check back in on them and see what's going on. But I'm crossing my fingers that something like Time Splitters continues on. And again, Crystal Dynamics seems unaffected. Next up, let's talk about one of the strangest releases for 2023. It is a new Game Boy Color game, and we're just going to look at the headline because I had to triple and quadruple check this to make sure it wasn't a massive troll or something. You can see this posted up over on Time Extension saying McDonald's just released a Game Boy Color game in 2023, and it's from McDonald's. This is Grimace's birthday. Now, you can play this in the browser, in your browser right now at the website that they launched for this, grimacesbirthday.com. And I believe it's for Grimace's birthday, sure, but like some shake that they're doing at McDonald's, sure. The marketing appears to be a brand new Game Boy Color game. And it's functional completely in an emulator or on actual hardware. Now, this is developed by Cruel Toys, all right? And we have footage of the game here. Somebody posted up a playthrough on YouTube, and it's the work of Grumpy Function, who's Tom Lockwood, and Pure Acidic, Brian Taylor. And they apparently have worked on modern Game Boy games in the past. But the fact that you can actually play this on a Game Boy Color or I guess even a brick Game Boy, although it does mention playing this on a Game Boy Color when you try to load it up there. So it even has it down to those specific details. And I think that's a pretty fun way to market something. Sure, it's a shake and it's Grimace's birthday, but I like the idea of these larger brands going around and just hiring people to make Game Boy games that they can just kind of put out there through ROM files, or can they release I guess they can release cartridges. I think it'd cost too much money for them to give them out with a Happy Meal. But even just kind of selling them, people would buy it for the novelty factor of it, especially if they went like the whole, like the distance and did a box, a manual, and all of that. I think people would get a kick out of that. And it's, again, just advertising for your brand. So maybe Burger King will do one with the King, like Sneak King could come out on the Game Boy Color. What an interesting world that would be, and I guess the door is open after seeing stuff like this. But otherwise, if you want to check it out, Grimace's birthday up on the website, or you can download the ROM file and fire it up on your own Game Boy Color. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about Xbox and the Japanese developer support that they have been working hard to kind of get back after what happened with the Xbox One, which was not great when it comes to having that Japanese support. The 360 was better. I mean, if you look at some of the stuff they did there with Blue Dragon, Infinite Undiscovery, Lost Odyssey, and even being able to pull Final Fantasy away from just being a PlayStation exclusive with Final Fantasy 13 launching on the PS3 and the Xbox 360. It was pretty big for the Xbox platform at the time. And recently, it seems like Microsoft has been trying to work back up to getting more of those games from Japanese partners. Well, Phil Spencer did at least comment on why some of these games are skipping or have been skipping the Xbox platform, once again with Giant Bomb. We can see this posted up, transcribed over on Tweaktowns from Phil Spencer, saying it's not any one thing. Sometimes it's business deals that are done, which I assume is referring to Square Enix and Sony for something like Final Fantasy 16. Sometimes the team has a focus that they're just, hey, we can only support 2 or 3 platforms. They're kind of reducing development risk. It is real. Every platform you add adds more work to the development team. Sometimes just a team that doesn't have a lot of connection to Xbox. They don't necessarily see it in their local game store when they walk in. It's even why our presence on the ground with Xbox, even if we're not selling as many consoles as the competition, if you go to Yadabashi Camera, I want there to be an Xbox section. I want there to be games that are shown. I also want the teams that are kind of on a base level that Xbox is a games platform, and it's something they see in their daily lives. I love the progress that we've made over the last 5 or 6 years there, but there's obviously more work for us to do. And that is a good point, because in Japan, clearly the Switch, or just Nintendo in general, is the dominant platform, the dominant brand. PlayStation still obviously has a lot of ties to Japan, and PlayStation 5 still sells there well enough. But the Xbox, as is mentioned, having just a section at a game store is a struggle for them. So if you're someone growing up in Japan, any of the major cities or anything, and you walk in, you're not really having an attachment to the Xbox brand. And these are people who will probably be growing up and eventually developing video games, and they might be more interested in developing for the Switch or the PlayStation because that's what they grew up with, not necessarily the Xbox. So yes, in terms of the overall brand, Microsoft has an absolute mountain to climb still in Japan, but they are making progress, as we saw at their latest showcase. I mean, Atlas was all over the place there. Capcom announced a brand new intellectual property even. So they are pushing, and we'll see if throughout this generation they can make more and more progress to being at least noticeable in Japan. But I'd say having stuff like that going into Game Pass with some of these big titles from Atlas, with Persona and Capcom showing up, they're at least on the right track. We'll see what happens throughout the rest of this generation. And before we go to the comment of the day, we're going to take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I asked, is the 30 FPS lock in Starfield on consoles a deal breaker for you? 14% say yes, I need 60 FPS on the Xbox. 14% say yes, but I'm going to try to get 60 FPS on PC. 46% say no, I don't mind 30 FPS with how big this game looks. Then 25% saying I'm just not interested in Starfield. And I see that 46% saying that, hey, the game looks big. You kind of understand, I guess. Some people do, like, wow, from what they're describing, if it really is that large, I can look past the frame rate because of the experience that they're promising right now. One that I've really not seen anywhere. I understand No Man's Sky gets brought up, but the narrative-driven experience that's being discussed here with Starfield is almost overwhelming, the fact that there would be that many planets that are more handcrafted than what's in No Man's Sky. And based on what we've seen with Bethesda in the past, with how deep some of these stories can go and sort of create your own adventure as you go, it's very enticing to then go into space. I mean, Skyrim was already kind of mind-blowing when it came out, right? And then you go to space and it's like, okay, how much bigger can this really get? And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Tinker saying, I'm amused by the fact that the Ghost Trick port is in RE Engine. They really gotten good with it. I think RE Engine is one of the most impressive engines, and it might be the most impressive, because a lot of times the thing with these engines, you kind of get the idea, like you see Unreal Engine used a lot and you're kind of like, all right, that has an Unreal Engine look to it. Some people were mentioning that with a lot of the medieval games like that you're seeing. You're like, yeah, these kind of all look the same. Oh, okay, Unreal Engine, I get it. But think of all the games we see from Capcom, and we have no idea it's on RE Engine until they tell us. Ghost Trick is just the latest example of that. So I like how creative they're getting with the engine, but I would also like to see them try other stuff with it. Like, could they bring back Breath of Fire and use the RE Engine in something that's more of a turn-based RPG? Could they continue to use it in side-scrollers and do an entire Mega Man X9 with RE? Come on, Capcom. It's right there. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. Where there's a situation right now with Starfield on the Xbox Series X, the most powerful console out now, but limited to 30 FPS in Starfield. How do you feel about that whole situation? And also about Grimace's birthday, a game from McDonald's releasing on the Game Boy Color in 2023. And then Embracer seems to be going through some struggles right now. What do you think the future holds for them? Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.